All right, guys, in this video, we're going to talk about Federalist number 10. This is one of the required documents for AP Gov. It's a big one. It's one of the required documents you really do need to know a lot about. Articles of Confederation didn't work out. They were way too weak. Shays Rebellion. This is where you had Massachusetts farmer basically marching on their state courthouses because their farms were being foreclosed on. In other words, they were being taken away from whoever the lenders were. And because the Articles of Confederation, there was no power to tax and there was no power to draft soldiers, basically with no standing army. This is showing the framers at the time, this is showing the elite at the time that basically this thing is allowing for mob rule. We don't want another rebellion. We just rebelled against England. Now we're rebelling against ourselves, essentially. So Shays Rebellion really shows the articles, shows that the Articles of Confederation are too weak. And basically, the framers at this time decide we need a stronger central government. We need to scrap this thing altogether, and we need to create a constitution. The Federalists at this time, this is basically your rich landowners at this time, start to write what's called the Federalist Papers. All right, and your writers or authors of these papers included James Madison, who in large part wrote the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. Madison writes Federalist number 10. He's speaking directly to New York. New York was a big holdout when it came to ratifying the Constitution, and he's explaining why this Constitution is going to be good. Now, in his Federalist number 10, he's getting to this. He's getting into the fact that we as human beings, we tend to group up with other like-minded human beings. And then when we form this group, we usually try to gang up on other groups or people. In other words, we, whether we're the majority or minority group, try to push our views onto others. And he says this can be a problem. This can lead to basically your government becoming ineffective. It can lead to this type of tyranny. So he's going to talk about how we're going to limit this faction problem. Okay, so in Federalist number 10, I divided into 4 parts. You're going to see that here. The first thing he does is he gets into the factions argument. And in this argument, he says factions are inevitable. So in other words, if we're going to have freedom, if we're going to have a free society, we are going to group up with like-minded people and try and push our views on to others. So these factions, these like-minded groups are inevitable. We can't destroy factions. We can't get rid of this faction problem without destroying liberty because essentially, again, we got this free society under the United States of America. We're going to have groups that want to push their views, whether that's contrary to other groups or not. And he says really the big problem is factions will seek to oppress one another. You're going to get this dominant majority where the minority is just never able to get what they want. He goes on to say that participatory democracy is a bad idea. This is not going to be the cure for faction. It doesn't get to like, okay, how are we going to cure this? How are we going to tame the mischiefs of faction? A little bit later on in the essay, the first thing he says is what we don't want is participatory democracy. We really don't want a whole lot of broad participation. Okay, participatory democracy or direct democracy is a bad idea. It will lead to a dominant majority that will infringe on the rights of the minority. Okay, so that's basically his argument there. Okay, next he gets into this large republic argument, and where he's going here is this is basically the cure for the faction problem. All right, so we should create this large republic. It splits power. It's created by the Constitution. It's the solution. Groups will compete. None will dominate, and the result will be compromise. Because we're creating this large republic, it's going to provide a lot of space for a variety of groups to come in and compete. No one group is going to be able to dominate. And therefore, you're going to get healthy, balanced democracy because you're going to get compromise. If we create this thing large enough, we get a whole lot of groups, no one group is going to be able to take over. Lastly, he talks about federalism will continue to dilute power. All right? Federalism is the fact that we have a national government and state governments and that power is divided between the two. All right, so again, federalism, it's a key, super important concept in AP government. Federalism is the division of power between our federal government and state governments. All right, and because of that, because power is divided in the country, it creates, again, multiple power centers where it's going to be really difficult for a group to take over these multiple power centers. Maybe you get somebody that becomes governor of Georgia that is particularly powerful in their, as a governor in Georgia, pushing some very contrarian views. However, that's going to be really difficult for that person now to go take over Alabama or Virginia. Point being is we have multiple power centers in the United States, so therefore it's going to be really difficult for one idea, one group to be able to control all these power centers. Because of that, again, you're going to have all these multiple groups in power competing for power and competing in general, and it's going to create compromise, or it's going to foster compromise, which is going to lead to a healthy, balanced democracy.